Well, good afternoon, everyone. We will call our community services subcommittee meeting to order. The first item is our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Stratford is situated on land shared between many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As a city, we have the responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the neutral Potawatomi peoples, as we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and play on this land. And now read our respect and Stratford statement. The Corporation of City of Stratford is committed to providing quality service to all members of the public, council, and our employees. Our goal is to promote a safe, healthy, and respectful, inclusive, and positive environment. We have a responsibility to treat people with respect by creating safe and respectful spaces. It is the city's expectation that all present will be respected. Item 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Being none. Item 3 is delegations, and we will return to that under item 4. Item 4 is a report of our council committee coordinator, with item 4.1 being our Energy and Environment Advisory Committee request for a 2027 free transit pilot. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you very much, through the chair. In 2024, the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee initiated discussions on potential enhancements to Stratford Transit, including things such as extending the hours and a free transit pilot. In March of 2026, they did a motion with a lot of information regarding the community climate action plan, etc., asking for a 1-year trial of free transit commencing in 2027, and that the lost fare revenue be replaced with savings from fare collection procedures and rebates from the provincial gas tax revenue. And I will, the rest of the information within the report, if there's something specific that anybody has a question about, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you. This time I also bring forward the request for delegation. Following we published our agenda, we had January Mitchell request to speak to subcommittee in support of option 4 of the staff report and to approve the request and initiate 1-year transit. So there's a motion that January Mitchell be heard. Moved by Councillor Bristol. All in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Mitchell, please be visited. Before you get started, I'll simply remind you have 10 minutes for your delegation. I'll give you the 1 8 minutes, so we only 2 minutes.
Chair, members of staff, Community Services Subcommittee, and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I care about how a free transit system can support our residents with their daily lives, the Community Climate Action Plan, and supporting our local economy with this motion. I'm here to ask you to direct staff to bring back a report of a time-limited 1-year fare-free transit pilot for Stratford using Orangeville's successful experience as a model. Orangeville is an Ontario town with a population of 30,167, according to the last census, so not very different from Stratford, which has made its local buses free starting in 2023. It began with a 2-year pilot, not a permanent commitment, to see what would happen if they removed the fares. The results have been remarkable. Before the pilot, Orangeville Transit carried over 100,000 rides a year. With fare-free transit, ridership jumped to about 225,000 rides in 2023. and the town expects 262,000 rides in 2024. That's more than double the previous usage. In other words, when they took away the barrier at the front door, people got on board. Financially, the change was manageable. Orangeville's fare revenue was in the range of $150,000 a year out of a transit budget of $1.2 million. Staff also pointed out that it cost them tens of thousands of dollars just to collect the revenue. The fare boxes, the handling of cash, printing passes and transfers, and administration. Council realized they were putting a lot of effort into collecting a relatively small amount of money in a way that discouraged exactly what they wanted, which was more people riding the bus. The benefits were much larger than the lost fares. An increase in the gas tax from the increased ridership helps this change be more sustainable. Orangeville has highlighted three benefits in particular: equity and access, climate concerns, and operational simplicity. First, equality and access. Free transit has made a real difference for youth, low-income residents, and people who don't drive. It means teenagers can get to part-time jobs and activities. People can reach medical appointments and services as well as jobs, and families on tight budgets move around the community without choosing between bus fare and groceries. It turns out the bus is a true public service, open to everyone. Secondly, climate concerns with transit emissions. Orangeville explicitly links fare-free transit to their climate action plan. The largest sector in our community is emissions. In Stratford at 42.3% is transportation. Anything we can do to decrease this amount will help us reach our targets. Since busing is attractive and convenient, it gives residents a clear incentive to leave the car at home and helps everyone get to where they need to go. It cuts down on emissions and congestion, making better use of existing road services that we already have. Every additional rider is a small step towards our climate goals. Thirdly is operational simplicity. Time and money can be saved when there are no fares or transfers to be collected, no passes to check, or complex fare rules to administer. The system is more welcoming and convenient, especially to new riders, occasional riders, and visitors to our city. Operators can now focus on safely driving without spending time on fare administration, and can have smoother on-time performance. Staff then has more time without the printing of tickets, transfers, passes, and equipment. Orangeville did this in a way that should be very comfortable to Stratford's governance culture. They didn't leap straight to free forever. Council approved a defined pilot, built in regular reporting, and asked staff to bring back hard data before making any long-term decision. In 2024, after reviewing ridership and financial impacts, Orangeville Council decided to extend the fare-free transit until 2027, so a future council can decide whether to make it permanent. Their advisory body, Sustainable Orangeville, formally endorsed continuing the program because of its social and environmental benefits. This is exactly the kind of cautious, data-driven experiment that Stratford could undertake. You don't have to decide to make transit free forever. Just do a pilot project to see what the results are. I'm asking you to take the first step to request a staff report that lays out what a Stratford fare-free pilot would look like, using Orangeville's model as a template. That report could answer some key questions. How much fare revenue does Stratford collect now, and what percentage of the total transit operating budget is it? What does it cost us to collect that revenue in equipment, staff time, and administration? If we move fares to a 1-year, perhaps 2-year pilot, what ridership increase could we reasonably expect based on Orangeville's experience? What would higher ridership mean for higher provincial tax budget? How would a fare-free pilot advance Stratford's climate equity, accessibility, and downtown vitality goals. The report could also outline options for the pilot scope. It could propose clear metrics and reporting timelines so that council staff and the community can track whether the pilot is doing what we want it to do. For example, you might ask staff to report every 6 months on ridership, cost per passenger, on-time performance, and user feedback, similar to what Orangeville does. You could also direct consultation with Stratford's Accessibility Advisory Committee and Energy and Environment Advisory Committee, so that equity and climate impacts are front and center, again, following Orangeville's approach with Sustain above Orangeville. Stratford has declared a climate emergency and has spoken many times about the importance of affordable housing, inclusive communities, and a strong local economy. Fare-free transit is a practical way to operationalize these commitments. It helps lower income to residents and youth the most. It supports workers and employees by improving access to jobs. It makes it easier for residents and visitors to choose sustainable transportation instead of a private car. Orangeville has shown us that this can work in a small Ontario municipality. They've more than doubled their ridership, kept the program going through multiple budget cycles, and extended it to 2027, based on evidence. Stratford does not have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn directly from their experience. It can take up to a year to form these new transport habits for people and your time plan, according to. So any new pilot program for transit would be most impactful if it was at least a year, noting the data from Orangeville. This would be similar to the 40-kilometer year-long pilot, which allows for success in the same 1 year period of time. So my ask to you today is simple and concrete. That you recommend council direct staff to prepare a report on fare-free transit for 1 year, for a 1 year pilot for Stratford, modeled on Orangeville's program, including financial scenarios, ridership projections, equity, climate impacts, and a proposed pilot design with clear evaluation criteria. Thank you for your time and for your work on improving community services in Stratford. Any questions?
Bring back to our agenda. We do have the report from the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee requesting for a 2027 free transit pilot. I'm just going to provide a couple of thoughts, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the community. And I want to start off by just simply stating, I think it's important we recognize what the energy environment was bringing before us, and I think we can all agree that the intent behind it for improving our transit usage, reducing emissions, and making the transportation more accessible to our community. I fully agree with our delegate and what she was bringing forward. That said, based on the report before us, I'm not prepared to support moving forward with 1 year free transit pilot in 2027. My primary concern for me is financial, and it's relative to the uncertainty of legal costs. The report clearly outlines an estimated cost of approximately, and I'll staff correct me on the numbers here, but approximately $729,000, or close to a 15% increase in the tax levy impact on transit services. Again, numbers are my best, so I will ask staff for the correct anything, and I have to reach exactly right on. This is a significant investment for what is and all at this stage still a pilot project. And at the same time, staff are also very clear there are no guarantees that the free transit will generate sufficient ridership increases or greenhouse gas reductions to justify the level of cost. So those are just my thoughts and concerns with the recommendation. So with that, those are my comments. I'll open it up to the rest of the committee. Yes, Councilor.
Thank you. Yeah, so I I think, looking at the options for the pilot program, I do think on its face, it is potentially very beneficial for our community. Certainly a lot of people who financial barrier for transit is the main issue. I think convenience could potentially be very much improved if we had no fees for transit, but I want more information and more specific sort of options and so I'm prepared to put forward option number one, that we request for review of the recommendation put forward by the AME and staff. And I just had a question about if that would come back to. My preference is that this would come to committee level and not subcommittee, that report. I'm just wondering where that would fall if this passed and staff were directed as such, where that would come back to? Just asking.
So I'll turn it back to the clerks for clarification.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, if the intent of the subcommittee is to have staff report back to the committee, then we can certainly list that on a committee agenda instead of a subcommittee agenda.
Okay, so then could I have that as part of the motion that the report, when it's completed, come to committee? I just think it'd be, when we have those options, it'd be a good opportunity for council or committee as a whole to have that discussion with that information. I do, I think it could be really beneficial, but I do, council B has concerns that I share as well about the costs, and I think before we jump right in, we need more information, so that's where I'm at right now.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, we have a motion on the table for option one as per the report. And
Right.
come back to full committee.
Right, yeah.
Council Bristol.
Thank you to the chair. I agree that I was looking to option one with the report, and I think similar to what our delegate said, like a caveat being that we look at minimum a year of the pilot project length. Stratford, 3 months is far too short. We're a different city every season. It doesn't capture a full school year, it doesn't capture first season, so a full year pilot, I think, would be the minimum we would look at. And that report would be my hope. But I also think even from when the recommendation was made, the energy market and what we're looking at fuel wise and emissions wise from 3 weeks ago to now is dramatically different. So jumping into something right now, we would have I don't even know if those numbers still hold with like how much fuel has gone up to run our fleet versus and so we're kind of eating in a moment where the cost would be rising, but we're also at a pressure moment where people probably aren't looking to drive as much themselves. So there is that opportunity. But I think how just geopolitically things are going to shake out over the next year, we have some time to study what that looks like. I think this is something to socialize with upper levels of government over the next year as well to bring into that report. There could be some huge funding opportunities as they're looking to diversify and opening up more environmental funding. So I would need to have a report studied first before we jump right in, but ensuring that report looks at a 1-year pilot program at the minimum so that we have accurate data to move forward. And I wouldn't see 2027 as a start date. I think I'd prefer to see 2028 most likely, or at least it started in 2027 September coinciding with the school year, just so we capture the high school student start. So like a late 2027 to 2028 as a time frame for that pilot, but I wouldn't see it beginning early 2027. Again, there's so much to be studied and so much changing internationally.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Director for some comments.
So through the chair, appreciate the comments. I would just caution when we suggested with the school year. Currently, the school buses, they have their own contract services. We are not running 3 special buses anymore for school. So by saying a free transit now, we will have to implement 2 more buses to be driven for specials, which would be 2 more drivers, which would be additional 2 more buses going out. So the numbers that are put in here, I would want to do a more further cost analysis because that 700,000 might be a little shy as to what the actual costs are. And I would want to have a consultation with the school board to say, hey, we are looking at potentially doing a pilot project. How does this impact your school bus program, the yellow buses? Because they may say we might discontinue them if you guys are running for a free service. So there's a lot of dialogue that needs to happen. So I think September 2027, maybe, or then 2027, maybe not, because I'd like to have a wholesome and put a report right together with actual numbers that we can stand from and say this is what's going to cost. As far as the climate change, we are looking at within a few years of doing more hybrid buses. which is a big step forward as well. So these buses idle a lot. That's when it goes on the hybrid electric. So there are big steps moving forward and helping reduce the carbon footprint. So I think that's a big one as well, that we are doing that forward. So I think it is important to give staff a little more time that we can get a proper report. I know when I did speak with the mayor from Orangeville at an annual conference, and this wasn't something they did within 6 months. There was a lot of research done, a lot of work done. Like for instance, they had 2 routes, we have 7. So it's not apples to apples, there's a lot of different variables. So it'd be nice for us to be able to take this back and come back with a report that I can say firmly and confidently, yes, this is what we can do. This is what potential gas or gas film tax, there might be none. We do have it allocated otherwise, we just have a firm number and a full report that we can confidently move. So,
Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, I would bring forward the motion. Put forward by Councillor 7. If there's no further discussion, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item 5 is department update. I'll turn it back over to the director for any highlights to share.
great, so through the chair, one of our big highlights, and it's a recognition of one of our staff with the cemetery department, Jeff Dale, as May 1st. He'll be retiring. He put in 37 years with the city, very short term with the Wakefield attendant, started his career in cemetery and is now finishing it as well. So really proud to say we've had staff about this quite an accomplishment, 37 years with the same incorporation. So just want to give a shout out to him. As far as our parks and cemetery, it's obviously transition period going into this spring from the winter time. We have trees coming in next week for the planting, going to subdivision and replacement trees. In our transit wise, we have our local partnership agreement, which will be coming forward to council within the next few months. We have an additional partner with West Perth. So it used to be St. Mary's North Perth, now West Perth is also coming on. So that's exciting news. And then in parallel, we have our 2 mobility buses. We're hoping that they will be in service or be completed and in the fleet by the May and hopefully in service in mid-summer. As far as recreation, our registration for day camp and the swim has been very successful. It's taken off. We're finding our swim camps, we got able to go within 30 seconds of being open. So definitely it's well used. As far as the sports tourism, we did do the Ontario Fencing Association did a tournament. We had 800 people attend that, so that was a big accomplishment. And as far as our facilities, obviously the Canadian Dairy Expo at last council was announced. We had 9,900 attendees on the first day, 8,800 the next day. So big event. It went smooth as we could hope for. And lots of capital projects going on. Boathouse is the rail is being completed. The band shell refurbishment is going to be completed within the next couple of weeks. So lots of projects on the go, and everything seems to be on track for capital projects.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the director? No, seeing none. Item 6 is advisory committee and outside board minutes. And we do have from our Communities in Bloom Advisory Committee, the minutes from August 7th, 2025, December 4th, and February 11th of this year. Our next subcommittee meeting is scheduled for May 14th here in the chamber. And if there's nothing further, I accept the motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Briscoe, all in favor, and that is carried. Thank you, everyone.